John Perkins, welcome to Silver Eels. You were here for this film, Dreamland. I'd just like to ask you, what was your part in this film?
Well, the film crew came to my house in the United States and interviewed me, and as I'd been watching what was going on in Iceland, I was very struck by the fact that it seemed to me that Iceland was one of the first countries to be hit by economic hitmen, but people who were doing today to Iceland what I had done in former times to places like Indonesia and Iran and many of the South American countries, African countries all over the world, to what we call the developing world. Suddenly a developed country, Iceland, is being hit, and it seemed to me that it was sort of an experiment in this process of how do we hit the developed countries now.
I have here two of your books. Confessions of an Economic Hitman was a bestseller, multi-million bestseller. I would just ask you to explain what is an economic hitman?
Well, I think it's fair to say that we economic hitmen have managed to create the world's first truly global empire. It's a secret empire because it hasn't been created by armies, people aren't aware of it. It's been created by economic hitmen. And the way we work is many different ways, but perhaps the most common is to identify a country that has resources that our corporations covet, like oil or here in Iceland, cheap energy. Then we arrange huge loans to that country. But the money doesn't actually go to the country. It goes to our own corporations to build big infrastructure projects in that country, hydroelectric dams or highways or big factory complexes. And yet the people of the country don't really benefit for the most part. A few wealthy people may benefit, or certain politicians who have arranged this may end up getting big jobs with the companies that come in. For example, in Iceland would be with the aluminum companies probably.
Yes.
But the people are left holding a huge debt, and it's such a big debt that you can't possibly repay it. So at that point, we feel that we have you. You know, we say you can't pay your debt, so give us a pound of flesh. Sell your energy resources real cheaply to us, or privatize your banking system and sell it to foreign organizations, to our companies, or send troops in support of ours to someplace in the world like Iraq, or vote with us on the next critical United Nations vote. And in this way, we've really managed to create this empire in a very, very subtle way. So in fact, you become part of the empire, but it isn't as though you're occupied by military forces. You're occupied by economic forces, in essence, by debt.
Well, Iceland is heavily in debt now.
For sure.
More so than most other countries.
Yes.
So it's mostly about resources. It's all about resources.
It's all about resources and control of populations, because that's how you get to control resources. When populations stand up to you, as a number of Latin American countries are doing today, you begin to lose the ability to control the resources. So it's about the resources, yes, but in the process it's also about controlling people so you can get at those resources.
A word you used is corporatocracy.
Correct, corporatocracy. Right?
Yes, it's a mouthful. Can you define that for me?
Well, you know, I think we have to ask ourselves if there's a modern empire, it's an economic empire, who's the emperor? And an emperor is not elected, doesn't serve a limited term, and reports to no one. Presidents, for example, of the United States, don't satisfy that definition. But what we really have is this group of people who run our biggest corporations. Now, this is not a conspiracy theory. These people don't have to come together to conspire to do anything illegal. But they do, in fact, control most of the politics around the world. Yes. And they control most of the media around the world. You know, through most of my lifetime, we'd look at the geopolitics as you got a globe with 180 some odd countries, of which a few are very powerful. The United States, the United Kingdom, the Soviet Union at various times. But today, you might better look at the geopolitics of the planet as being still 180 countries, but you've got these huge clouds swirling around the planet that know no borders, don't respect any particular set of laws. These are the big corporations. And they'll strike deals in Iceland, they'll strike deals with the Chinese and the Taiwanese and the Tibetans, they'll strike deals with the Israelis and the Arab nations, with whoever they need to gain control of resources. So we're at a time in history that's like when the city-states became nations, except now the nations are losing their importance, and the big corporations are taking over. The multinationals.
Many of them are larger than medium-sized states or even fairly large states.
Absolutely. Of the 100 economies the 100 largest economies in the world, over 50 of them are big corporations.
You have called this a vicious empire. Is it vicious?
Yes, I think it's very vicious. It's vicious in a different way from past empires that could be extremely vicious militarily. This empire is vicious economically. So it keeps people below the poverty level intentionally in many places because that serves its interests best. People starve because of this empire. AIDS spreads because of this empire. This empire really has very little compassion. In fact, it sees poverty as a way of controlling resources and controlling people. That's very, very vicious.
Yeah. In a different book, I'm sure you've read it, the corporations are described as being, not only are they not moral, but they are described as sociopaths or sociopathic.
Well, it's interesting. I think one of the things we can look at is why are executives, CEOs of some of the biggest corporations in the world paid so much? And one of the reasons is it's very hard to find people that are able to do those jobs. Because in fact, those jobs do require sociopathic people, people that have no compassion for anyone else, people that are willing to go out into the world and do extremely awful things to people. Yeah. And I think you have to pay people a lot to take those positions. Having said that, I'd also like to say that I have great hope that this is an empire that we can turn around, because it isn't a military empire, and that the majority of executives that I know, excluding those CEOs at the very top of the biggest corporations who I think are sociopaths, but other than those, we've got a lot of executives that are human beings like you and me. They have children, they want to have grandchildren, or they have grandchildren, and they don't want to see the world destroyed. They would like to see a better world. Yes. And we, the people, really need to pressure them to do something different.
But we are looking at the third world, which is being really plundered by these corporations. They are the poor people, the mass of people are not enjoying the benefits of
correct.
What is happening? No.
Well, that is correct, but we're seeing a revolution in Latin America, for example, where 10 countries representing more than 80% of the population of South America have recently, within the last few years, democratically and peacefully voted in presidents who are saying no more of this. We're not going to be servants to the IMF anymore. We're not going to sell our resources basically to the lowest bidder. Bolivia is saying, the profits from Bolivia's gas have to go to help Bolivia's people, and Ecuador is saying the profits from Ecuador's oil have to help Ecuador's people. These presidents, Correa of Ecuador and Morales of Bolivia, and the other 8 presidents in these categories, 2 of which are women, like in your country, we've got Argentina and Chile with these women presidents. They're saying no more of this. We're going to stand up to this. And during most of my lifetime, every one of these countries was controlled by a series of brutal dictators. But that's all changed. So there is a revolution coming about. There are social movements around the world that are beginning to understand. And I think what's exciting about Iceland is that you have an extremely educated population here. Programs like yours are helping to educate people. If the Icelandic people can truly see what's going on, you can be a leader in turning this whole thing around. And that's why I'm here in Iceland, because I hope that'll happen.
But basically now the IMF is running Iceland, is running the show here. After the collapse, but you have a governor from the IMF.
Yeah, but you don't have to allow that to happen any more than the Latin American countries.
You are very skeptical of the IMF, are you?
Extremely. It's a brutal organization, and the recent G20 conference last week, sort of is an attempt to bring the IMF back. That's part of what happened there. The IMF was basically going into extreme decline. Nobody was paying much attention. All these countries were rebelling against it. But at the G20 conference, it got this huge boost as part of this $1 trillion investment of all these countries. But we don't have to put up with that, and let me say this, I think an organization like an IMF could be a good organization. You could use that money, but the culture within the IMF today is one that comes from this background of exploitation, of taking control of people and economies for very selfish reasons to serve this secret empire, if you want to call it that.
So we should beware of